Kim Chulsoo had just pulled off the impossible. He'd become a legendary Goblin Summoner. His first move: summon a max-level goblin and unleash chaos. Not bad for a guy who, until yesterday, was breaking his back as a virtual laborer. In the game world, he'd been stuck in the lowest tier job, mining. Day in, day out, it was just digging, hauling, and more digging. A soul-numbing grind. He used to wonder how he'd ever get rich like the pros or date one of those bombshells with fairy wings and legendary gear. But then, jackpot. He unearthed a healing stone worth 300,000 gold. Overwhelmed with joy, Kim did something ridiculous. He started licking the stone in pure excitement. That's when a beautiful woman appeared, looking sweet and almost unreal. She explained that a dungeon deeper in was blocked by an enormous ore. They needed someone high level, and preferably good looking, to help clear the path. Kim figured he had the looks but not the stats. He admitted he was out of their league, couldn't help them. Then a dwarf in the group tried to talk him into it too. Kim hesitated. Joining meant splitting XP and maybe scoring rare ore. And hey, dying in-game wasn't permanent. It sounded like a sweet deal. Before he could make up his mind, the woman played her trump card. She turned up the charm. Kim never stood a chance. Temptation won. He followed them into the dungeon. The second he stepped inside, monsters swarmed like angry bees. Just when he thought it was game over, an explosion wiped them out. The woman had saved him. She warned him softly not to stray too far from her side because it was dangerous. Kim practically welded himself to her location. Meanwhile, the rest of the group shredded monsters left and right. One of them scoffed that Kim's mining points were useless, calling him dead weight. That one hit deep. Kim clenched his fists. He thought bitterly that if it weren't for his endless mining, they wouldn't even be standing here. He'd had enough. The insult hit like a hammer to the gut. Driven by anger, he activated his mining skill and got to work, hacking at the ore with a fury he didn't know he had. As he worked, the others stood around chatting, still unsure if the rumors about the dungeon were true. Sweat pouring down his face, Kim finally cracked open the massive ore. Behind it, a hidden passage revealed itself. Word was, a secret class was locked away inside. It was a gold mine, but then everything shifted. The woman's expression went cold. Stone cold. Before Kim could react, her teammate attacked. One clean hit. Kim was on the ground, bleeding and broken. She said bluntly that they only needed him to find the dungeon. They called him a worthless noob. Asked if he really thought anyone would bring along someone like him just to be nice. He could only lie there, stunned, as they walked into the secret dungeon without even bothering to finish him off. In his pain, his hand crushed the healing stone he'd found earlier. Then he realized, the gate to the dungeon was still open. That meant it wasn't cleared yet. Teeth clenched, Kim made a reckless decision. He followed them inside. Deeper within, he found a stairway spiraling down. At the bottom sat a throne. And on it, a massive goblin, regal and unmoving. This was the Goblin Temple. A place only goblins were supposed to enter. He stumbled across a dead dwarf along the way, the same one who'd betrayed him. Somehow, the dwarf had managed to send Kim a revive request before dying. The nerve. Then came the system alert. It warned him this dungeon was way beyond his level. Strongly suggested he leave. That's when a scream tore through the silence. Kim looked up. One of the woman's teammates was caught in a giant hand, crushed like a toy. The woman herself was slammed into the ground. A towering level 80 monster stood between Kim and everything he thought he understood about the game. Kim Chulsoo was level 20. The monster opened its jaws, massive, bloodstained, and devoured the teammate in one bite. Gone. Just like that. The game was known for realism, but also had pain filters. Normal hits didn't hurt much, but taking a direct hit from something 60 levels above? That could fry your brain. Literally. The once flirty, confident woman now looked at him, pleading for help. But Kim couldn't move. Couldn't act. He knew getting hit by that thing could trigger real-life brain trauma. He couldn't die here. So he turned and ran. Call it weak. Call it cowardly. But if he wanted to live, he had no choice. That's when the system popped up a new message. The Goblin Lord pities your cowardly, spineless behavior. Kim stopped cold. Cowardly, spineless. Him. Maybe it was true. He hated it, but he had no power to fight it. And then, behind him, the woman was squashed like a bug. No ceremony. No mercy. In that moment, Kim realized something cruelly obvious. Whether in-game or real life, he was always just a grunt. A laborer in the real world. A miner here. His parents gone, debt crushing him. He hadn't done anything wrong. So why did life treat him like trash? He screamed at the monster on the throne, asking why. Why even goblins felt sorry for him. Why it had to be this way. Then came the notification. You have earned the title, Honorary Goblin. Goblins now recognize you as kin and will aid you in battle. Hidden class unlocked. Frowny face Goblin Summoner. Would you like to change class? Kim blinked. Seriously? What kind of trash title was that? He swore there was no way he'd pick something so ridiculous. System notification. Class change confirmed. You are now a Goblin Summoner. Suddenly, the monster charged. No more time to think. Kim had only one option. He triggered the skill. The summoning animation was massive, like a dragon was about to explode into existence. Instead, a scrawny little goblin appeared, barely able to hold a wooden club. Kim stared, thinking maybe he could at least use it as bait to buy time. He ordered it to attack. The goblin didn't hesitate. It ran forward and smacked the charging monster with its club. One hit. Instant kill. The monster dropped, lifeless. Kim stood frozen, completely stunned. System notification. Experience gained. New skills unlocked. Goblin feeding and goblin walks. The goblin's express surged, but the system noted its level was already maxed. It couldn't go higher. Kim couldn't believe it. This goofy-looking goblin was max level? He tried checking its stats, but the system blocked him. No access. There was no way a standard goblin should be this powerful, unless it was a bug. And if it was a bug, he was gonna ride it as far as it would take him. Meanwhile, the woman who betrayed him had taken a psychological hit. Her character's brutal death had rattled her. The scream she let out drew real-life security. Her condition was bad enough that she was forced to log out for mental health reasons. Back in the game, Kim and his goblin went on a rampage. The max-level gremlin was a one-hit god, tearing through enemies like paper. Kim's own level soared. His inventory overflowed, magic stones and materials stacked to 999. Every monster in the mine, gone. His goblin hadn't leveled once, but Kim had already reached level 31. He tried one more time to view the goblin's data, still blocked. This thing was a glitch. No doubt about it, and Kim Chulsoo wasn't about to waste a golden bug. He logged out, ready to make his next move. The first thing Kim Chulsoo did was cash out his in-game loot for real money. Only now did he grasp the sheer economic force behind this game. Among his haul were some rare materials from the hidden dungeon. When he brought them to the bank, the branch manager personally came out to greet him. The man even served him tea, which made Kim wary. The manager politely suggested that Kim deposit the money with their bank, explaining that the materials were worth 2.3 billion won. Thanks to that goblin, Kim immediately wiped out 10% of his crushing debt. He thought that anyone who said goblins were ugly clearly hadn't seen his. That little guy was downright adorable. Well, mostly. The goblin refused to unsummon and insisted on following Kim around everywhere, even through town. Naturally, it drew attention. Whispers filled the street as other players gawked at the ugly little troll trailing behind him. Kim remained oblivious. Until the goblin walked headfirst into someone. That someone was a hulking, muscle-packed player who glared down and sneered, questioning what a goblin was doing parading around like it owned the place. The crowd instantly recognized him. Peyton the Annihilator. Kim Chulsoo knew the guy was infamous for his short temper. He quickly explained that the goblin wasn't a monster, emphasized that it wasn't hostile. But Peyton had no interest in explanations. He drew his sword and swung it down. In a flash, the goblin responded. One hit from its stubby club, and Peyton dropped like a pile of bricks. Gasps exploded through the street. Peyton the Annihilator, taken out in one hit. Kim broke into a cold sweat. Definitely not the time to admit he was the Goblin Summoner. Peyton's guildmates surged forward, laughing and mocking. One of them joked that Peyton was all bark, no bite. Kim panicked. What if the goblin decided to turn on the rest of them next? Desperate, Kim stepped between them, insisting he'd handle the goblin, but they brushed him aside like trash. Then, ding! Goblin used a throwing skill. A rock flew, clean hit, another player knocked out cold. Kim didn't wait. He grabbed the goblin and bolted. He thought bitterly that he'd just started living the good life. How did it all spiral so fast? Suddenly, a bald man shouted at him from an alley, telling him to get in and that there was no time to explain. Thinking he was saved, Kim rushed inside, only for the man to immediately raise his weapon for a backstab. A system message popped up. The Goblin Lord scoffs at your cowardly behavior. Kim felt his frustration spike. First spineless, now cowardly. He'd had enough. No more running. No more hiding. If that filthy guild wanted war, he'd burn them all to ash, with his goblin. Meanwhile, Payton's guild scoured the city. A blonde girl dismissed the need for escalation, saying it was just a goblin and that there was no need to call Shadowrun. But Hearn narrowed his eyes, saying something felt wrong. That goblin wasn't normal. Then, a scream. The bald man was launched from the alley like a ragdoll, bouncing across the pavement. The goblin appeared behind Hearn in total silence. Hearn attacked on instinct, but when he checked the system, 0 damage. That earlier rock throw hadn't been a fluke. Hearn could feel it. This goblin was dangerous. The goblin raised its club to finish him off. But a defensive force knocked it back. The blonde girl had intervened. She asked what Hearn was doing just standing there, getting clobbered by a goblin. He blinked, confused, and tried to rationalize that it couldn't possibly have done that kind of damage. It had to be a trick. Gritting his teeth, he activated Extreme Malice, a skill that cut his speed by 90% but guaranteed a critical hit. The blonde girl questioned why he'd use such a powerful move on a goblin. He didn't answer. She still backed him up, casting Gale Arrow to clear status effects and adding a buff to boost his attack even more. Hearn lunge. Assassin's passive kicking in, speed turning into raw power. His blade struck the goblin dead center, still 0 damage. Disbelief froze his face. The goblin tilted its head, stuck out its tongue, and stared. Then, BM. One swing. Hearn collapsed, instantly KO'd. Kim stepped forward with a cold smirk, confirming that yes, it was his summon. Shock rippled through the crowd. Their guild's strongest assassin had just been flattened. Kim calmly told them not to worry about that. He said they should focus on what was happening now. The blonde girl backed into the wall, trembling. She asked what he wanted. He sneered, said he'd had enough of people like her. When she screamed for help, Kim ordered the goblin to silence her, warning it not to wake the entire city. Too late. Downstairs, heads turned. People looked up. A crowd gathered within seconds. Kim tried to order the goblin to stop, but the situation was already out of control. The crowd shouted in outrage. They accused the goblin of attacking a defenseless girl after wiping out an entire guild. Kim stood frozen. How had it come to this? Desperate, he shouted at the goblin to let her go. The crowd gasped. A no-name newbie was stepping in to stop a goblin strong enough to defeat Handel's elite. The blonde girl cried, playing the perfect damsel. Kim felt like dying. This was it. His gaming life over. And then, cheers. Cheers erupted from below. Kim blinked. Wait, did they think he was a hero? Apparently, yes. In their eyes, he looked like a brave, mysterious savior who had thrown himself in front of a rampaging monster to rescue a helpless girl. He realized what he had to do. He leaned in, whispering coldly to the blonde girl. He warned that if she ever opened her mouth about the truth, he'd kill her. Over and over. Even in the sanctum, where HP was infinite, he'd make sure she understood real hell. She nodded furiously, tears spilling down her cheeks. With that handled, Kim snapped into performance mode. He pointed at the goblin and shouted that this wild monster had broken into a safe zone. For everyone's safety, he declared, he would deal with it personally. He activated Frowny Face Goblin Walk. A glowing leash snapped around the goblin's neck. Kim yanked hard, dragging it away like it was just some misbehaving pet, even hauling it off the rooftop. The onlookers were stunned. A newbie using a high-level restraint skill? A system message appeared. Goblin feels happy after going on a walk. Kim turned back and warned the crowd to stay clear. He said this goblin was dangerous, probably over level 50. Gasps. Level 50? Most of them couldn't even scratch that. Kim assured them they couldn't kill the goblin, but they could drive it out. He activated Frowny Face Goblin Feed, tossing a chunk of food just beyond the town gates. The goblin sprinted after it like a starved puppy. Kim shouted to shut the gates. The town walls slammed shut with a heavy boom, sealing the goblin outside. The street fell silent. Did that actually work? Then, thunderous cheers. He'd done it. He'd driven the monster out. Kim let out a long breath. That should buy him some time. The blonde girl approached him quietly. She said that her guildmates had all been transferred to the Sanctum's resurrection zone. She was the only one left who knew the truth. Tearfully, she promised again not to say anything. Kim smirked. He reminded her that in the Sanctum, no one could die, but he could still make her suffer. If she broke that promise, he'd kill her again and again until she learned fear. She trembled, eyes wide, cheeks soaked. That night, Kim finally checked into the town inn. His first moment of peace in what felt like ages. Kim Chulsoo sat quietly, thinking that if he had this kind of power back then, maybe he could have saved her. The memory weighed heavy. Back when the Goblin Lord had mocked him, he'd received a random reward, a single skill point. Curious, he opened the skill shop. Almost everything was locked. Only one option blinked at him. Rally. He activated it. Instantly, the goblin materialized beside him like a summoned curse. Kim was startled, realizing this skill forcibly summoned all active pets to his location. The goblin's sudden arrival caused noise downstairs. The innkeeper NPC rushed up the stairs, demanding to know what was going on. Kim waved him off, claiming it was just his summoned beast misbehaving. He gently patted the goblin, calming it down. Looking into the creature's goofy face, Kim thought they were the same. Neither had done anything wrong, yet both got blamed for everything. That night, Kim chose to sleep on the floor of the inn, right beside his goblin. By morning, word had spread. The resurrected members of the Abaddon Guild gathered in the tavern, buzzing with disbelief. Kim Chulsoo, the unknown player, had single-handedly driven out the goblin. Even Shadow Hearn showed up to thank him in person. The blonde girl stood nearby, still visibly uneasy. Hearn chuckled and told her to relax. He said Kim had saved them, after all. Kim replied coolly, saying he had his reasons and that he was after something specific. Hearn nodded, saying that he understood and didn't let debts go unpaid. When the conversation shifted to Kim's inability to earn gold in the beginner zone, he asked how he could get to the next area. A familiar voice answered. It was the bald man who had tried to ambush him the day before. Kim narrowed his eyes, recognizing him instantly, ready to retaliate. But the bald man bowed quickly, apologizing before launching into an explanation of the game's structure. He explained that the beginner zone had 5 open-world dungeons, places like the slime plains and mining caves that anyone could enter freely. But to leave the beginner zone, players had to clear a raid dungeon, which was fundamentally different. It only opened at specific intervals. Worst part. It opened just once a month. That was why so many players had gathered. Yesterday had been the scheduled raid day, but the goblin incident had thrown everything into chaos. Now, the entire zone was locked down for another month. Kim's stomach twisted at the thought of grinding in this low-reward zone for 30 more days. He snapped, demanding to know if there was another way out. Hearn didn't even glance at him. He said that yesterday's death had already settled the score. Then he turned and walked away, his guildmates following silently. The blonde girl paused, gave Kim a long look, and then followed without a word. Unseen behind them, Kim's goblin let out a strange, eerie laugh. Then, the impossible happened. The raid dungeon portal reopened. Confusion spread like wildfire. It wasn't supposed to. Everyone knew the cooldown was 30 days. A system notification confirmed it. Frowny Face Raid Dungeon now open. A dungeon that should have been sealed was active again. This time, only their group could enter. Everyone else had already cleared it. Kim stared at the portal and narrowed his eyes. So this was the game they were playing. He accused them of lying, of stringing him along, pretending there was no way in. The blonde girl immediately panicked. She insisted they didn't know this would happen. Kim didn't believe her for a second. He wasn't about to let them stroll in and grab all the loot. In the end, they agreed to enter as a group. Before stepping in, Hearn briefed the team. He said the dungeon only had one boss room, that the difficulty wasn't too high, but warned not to underestimate it. The full Abaddon Guild squad assembled, except their guild leader, then the party entered. Not wanting to expose his trump card, Kim whispered to the goblin to stay hidden. He'd summon it only if needed. After last time, there was no chance he'd let his guard down again. Strangely, he also noticed the high-grade healing stone he used yesterday was still in his inventory. That shouldn't be possible. Staying sharp, Kim stepped into the portal. The fight began instantly. A level 40 iron golem emerged, charging them the second they arrived. Everyone felt something was off. Even the bald man looked uneasy. He muttered that this dungeon wasn't standard. It had to be a hidden version, but how? The blonde girl shouted at Kim to run. He scoffed. Run? From a hidden dungeon? He pointed out that the loot here could be game-breaking. Worst-case scenario, he'd cough up some blood in the real world. He didn't buy into the brain-death rumors. He told the others they could run if they wanted. He'd take the treasure himself. He activated Goblin Rally. Nothing happened. His goblin didn't respond. Grinding his teeth, Kim stepped forward alone. The iron golem swung its massive fist. One blow. Kim slammed into the stone floor, lifeless. System notification. Player Kim Chulsoo has died. The rest of the party stood in stunned silence. Wasn't it the guy who banished the goblin yesterday? How had he gone down in one hit? Someone noticed the portal behind them had vanished. Standard raid dungeon rules. Once combat starts, no escape. The bald man finally confirmed it. Occasionally, monthly raid dungeons spawned hidden variants. This was one of them, and with the exit sealed, they had no option but to fight. In the real world, Kim stared at the death screen in disbelief. Level 30. And he'd been one shot. He opened his status window. Then nearly choked. He'd never assigned a single stat point. Fuming, he screamed at the screen, demanding to know why his goblin hadn't answered the summon. He called it useless, then shook his head. Whatever. He wasn't missing out on that loot. Back in-game, the Abaddon Guild had begun their assault. The blonde girl activated Wind Arrow, boosting everyone's movement speed. The party charged together toward the golem. The bald man barked commands, hit the knees, the joints, anywhere that looked weak. A storm of blows landed against the boss's legs. Someone shouted that every monster had a weak spot. Two players pulled off a 32-hit combo. Then, silence. They checked the combat log. 0 damage. The bald man muttered that there were only two explanations. Either the boss's defense was ridiculously high, or it was completely immune to weak attacks. Then Hearn stepped forward, activating his passive, Contempt for the Weak, a percentage-based skill that bypassed raw defense. His strike finally landed damage. Cheers rang out from the team. For now, only Shadow Hearn could hurt it. The bald veteran shook his head slowly and stated that there was still one more person who could hit harder than anyone else on the field, the blonde girl. He explained that she possessed a one-shot skill that scaled with charge time. The longer she focused, the more devastating the blow. He added that if anyone saw what that move could truly do, she'd probably end up as the next guild leader. Just then, Peyton, the so-called Annihilator, stepped forward and shouted taunt, triggering the aggro drawing skill with dramatic flair. The iron golem reacted instantly, turning and charging straight at him. From a distance, Kim Chulsoo watched and scoffed. He thought the guy was an idiot, charging a hidden boss head on like some macho cliché. Peyton stood firm, taking the full impact and barely budging. He sneered at the golem, mocking it, asking if that was really all it had. What Peyton didn't realize, though, was that the bald veteran had quietly activated Shared Pain, absorbing a portion of the damage. Peyton had been protected the whole time and had no clue. Kim Chulsoo couldn't make sense of it. These weren't high-level players. None of them had secret classes or god-tier gear. And yet, they moved like a cohesive, battle-hardened unit. The tank drew aggro, others targeted weak points with precision. It was a fully synchronized system. Then the blonde girl stepped forward, standing firm as she began charging her ultimate skill. Kim watched her carefully. That was how a real guild operated: trust, timing, coordination. But if they took the boss down without him, he'd get nothing. No experience, no loot. Suddenly, the iron golem raised its fist, about to crush the tank. A system alert flashed. Monster has changed its target. Kim Chulsoo scoffed. He muttered that the side characters had fumbled around long enough. Time for the protagonist to reclaim center stage. He crushed his high-grade healing stone and activated resurrection. Rising slowly to his feet, he declared that this was the perfect timing for the main character's entrance. A system notification confirmed it. Iron Golem has locked onto Kim Chulsoo. The golem roared and slammed the ground with its ultimate move, Earth Shatter. The shockwave swept across the field, instantly eliminating 4 players. Someone screamed in panic, accusing Kim of dooming them all by reviving at the worst possible moment. 2 more were taken out by a follow-up slam before they even had a chance to react. Peyton, now furious, charged the golem in a final act of defiance. Before his blade could land, the golem smashed him to the ground with brutal force. Due to shared pain, the bald veteran collapsed beside him, also crushed. Kim Chulsoo blinked in disbelief. He insisted it wasn't his fault. He had just come back to life. Then the realization hit. The Iron Golem wasn't prioritizing tanks. It was targeting ranged attackers and healers. The actual threats. Peyton's taunt had distracted it earlier. His own resurrection had triggered a full aggro reset. With the assassin squad now exposed, the boss plowed through them without pause. The tank got caught in the blast too. They didn't stand a chance. The blonde girl panicked. Her hands shook, her arrows trembling. She wasn't ready. Hearn shouted that she needed to focus and stay calm. He warned that if she fired now, all her charging would go to waste. The assassins hadn't even broken the golem's defense yet. Premature release would doom them all. Determined, Hearn dashed forward, trying to buy her a few more seconds. Kim stepped beside the blonde girl and asked if there was anything he could do. She snapped that without his goblin, he was dead weight. His presence only made things worse. He froze, stunned. He wondered why she looked at him like the enemy. After all, they were the ones who tricked him. Why was he supposed to save them now? Gritting his teeth, he muttered under his breath, cursing them all. The Iron Golem continued to fixate on the blonde girl. Hearn dove between them just in time, trying to pull aggro. Massive damage dealers naturally attracted hate, and she was practically glowing. A system alert confirmed. Iron Golem has locked onto Shadow Hearn. With over 20,000 HP left, there was still hope, if they could hold out just a little longer. But Hearn was out of MP. He had nothing left. The next hit landed straight to his chest. He dropped. System notification. Shadow Hearn has been slain. Kim cursed loudly, blaming the team. He shouted that they'd made him waste a high-grade healing stone. The blonde girl fired back, yelling that everything had gone wrong the moment he decided to resurrect. Kim refused to take the blame, but she gritted her teeth and told him to shut up. She said she needed just 10 more seconds to finish charging the final strike. While they argued, another system alert came through. Iron Golem has locked onto the blonde girl. She hadn't finished charging, but she had no choice. She had to shoot now or die. Then it hit Kim. She couldn't move while charging. If they could buy 10 more seconds, they might still survive. Without hesitation, Kim scooped her up and started running. She was stunned. His speed nearly matched Shadow Hearn's. He dumped every single attribute point into speed, and during their earlier argument, he'd even earned a goblin point. A special stat awarded only for shameless behavior. Even the Goblin Lord had judged him. As he ran, he shouted for her to fire the shot, but the bouncing made it impossible to aim. One bad shot and it was game over. He clenched his jaw. This had to count. He needed that loot. He had to make that healing stone worth it. The blonde girl continued charging her skill, her HP down to just 1%. Then, the Iron Golem unleashed its deadliest move, Heaven-Earth Shatter. A full range, no escape blast. Debris filled the air. Rocks shattered, vision blurred. She was down to her final hit point. If anything touched her, she was gone. Amid the chaos, Kim suddenly smiled, not because he had a plan, but because he remembered the joy of playing games with friends. A moment of calm in the storm. Then, the dungeon itself cracked open. From the rupture, a green head poked through. The goblin. It had returned. Kim muttered in disbelief, wondering what had taken it so long. The summon felt like it had taken an entire week. The blonde girl stared wide-eyed. She asked if the goblin had literally broken through the dungeon itself. It had. The goblin leapt through the air, planted itself in front of Kim, and tanked the golem's ultimate head-on. The force of the blow rippled outward, but the goblin stood firm. The hidden boss, once terrifying, now looked small in front of Kim Chulsoo. The real massacre was about to begin. The blonde girl finally let go. Her one-shot arrow pierced the air and drilled through the golem's core. System notification. Hidden dungeon cleared. Iron Golem defeated. The kill shot was hers. Ji Yun, known now as the Blonde Killer, rocketed from level 27 to 31 in one strike. Kim Chulsoo surged to level 34. 3 levels gained in a flash. Naturally, the first thing to do was check the loot. Since the dungeon had been cleared, all fallen teammates were automatically revived by the system. One more hit and it could have been a total wipe. Shadow Hearn frowned, demanding to know what had just happened. His voice was tense. Kim Chulsoo, standing tall in the aftermath, claimed every single reward for himself. They had just taken down the hidden boss, but when the system prompt appeared, it cut deeper than any betrayal. You do not meet the requirements to change to the hidden class. Ji Yun stood frozen in disbelief. She asked what Kim Chulsoo meant. She was the one who landed the final blow, cleared the dungeon, fired the arrow. But Kim already knew the answer. Unlocking a hidden class wasn't about damage or kills alone. You had to meet secret conditions. Same as when he became a Goblin Summoner. He hadn't even cleared the dungeon back then. He admitted to himself that he was curious about the hidden class reward, sure. But right now, his eyes were locked on something more immediate, the loot. Ji Yun insisted they had all contributed and said the spoils should be shared. But Kim dismissed her logic entirely. He had zero patience for fairness. Hearn, though, spoke up. He said Kim had helped their guild twice already. The loot, he added, wasn't worth the argument. Before Kim could respond, the familiar sound of shuffling footsteps echoed from behind. Turning around, of course it was the bald old man. Again. The same guy who'd already stabbed him once. Clearly back for a sequel. But Hearn calmly blocked the path. He said if they wanted to kill Kim, they would have already done it. He explained that while the rest of the loot could be ignored, the bow belonged to Ji Yun. It was class locked, archer only. Kim couldn't even equip it. He added sarcastically that it wasn't exactly edible either. Kim already knew that. Still, he wanted the bow, just to have it, just to prove a point. Hearn insisted Ji Yun should get it. Kim shrugged and replied that sure, she could have it, if she could beat him in a fight. That's when the bald man finally understood what Kim had done. He'd picked up the weapon knowing they'd all revive after the dungeon. He planned to ransom it back, same as a shady goblin would. The man muttered that Kim and that little gremlin were the same breed of scumbag. Unseen by most, that very goblin was currently lurking in the shadows, eavesdropping with a grin. Eventually, Ji Yun got the bow back, the Iron Golem's exclusive gray weapon. Deal done. Hearn turned to Kim and asked where he was headed next. Kim didn't answer. Obviously, he planned to go somewhere far away from all of them. There was no reason to hang around and get drained dry again. Hearn's team left the dungeon without another word. Ji Yun looked back at Kim one last time. Her expression was unreadable. Kim and his goblin walked off, the dust barely settling. Giving up the bow stung a little, sure, but he had something far better. A consumable called Thief's Glove. It allowed him to steal one item from lower-level monsters. One-time use, not applicable to players. But the real prize? A chunk of high-purity steel. As someone who once spent his life mining, Kim knew exactly how valuable that was. He'd almost overlooked it in the excitement over the flashy bow. Now, he was glad he hadn't. A rare class weapon was nice, but with the right materials, he could build something truly game-breaking. And let's not forget, those people stabbed him in the back first. Soon, he reached Phoenix Town, a bustling city teeming with high-level players. Back in his old village, he'd never seen gear this advanced. The difference was staggering. These people were swimming in loot. Kim could smell the money in the air. Then, Kim was still wearing the same ragged starter gear. His defense stat? Still in the negatives. Just as he rezzed, his goblin tugged on his pants. Kim flinched, certain the little gremlin was up to something. He looked up. and froze. A towering beast loomed over him. A boss-tier monster. In the middle of town. Panic surged through him. He barked at the goblin to protect him. A calm voice cut through the tension. A woman remarked that she'd never seen anyone summon a goblin before, and asked if it was his. The speaker was a level 76 summoner named Eileen. Kim finally noticed. Someone was riding the beast. That monster was her summon. Eileen smiled, assuring him there was no need to panic. Her companion, Michelle, was completely tame inside city limits. Kim watched as the massive creature drooled, its teeth inches away. He didn't need a fight to know. This woman was on a whole other level. She could probably solo a raid with that thing. Eileen complimented Kim and asked for his name. He stammered, introducing himself as Kim Chulsoo. But she clarified, she was talking to the goblin. She pointed out that he hadn't even given it a name. That kind of one-sided relationship, she warned, was dangerous. She said he gave orders, expected loyalty, but offered no identity, no dignity in return. She added that the goblin had obeyed his protect command, but had never even been treated as a living being. She called it sad. Then, with an icy edge, she said that next time they met, she hoped he'd stop being such a pathetic excuse for a master. Kim muttered under his breath. Nosy woman. He didn't have time for that. He headed to the blacksmith. Inside, he was met with a sneer. The blacksmith, grumpy Hempri, didn't even look up. He told Kim someone like him should stick to garbage armor. Kim explained he wanted to buy decent gear. Hempri tossed over a chestplate priced at 350 gold. Clearly not impressed. Kim understood perfectly. A high-level summon meant nothing if the summoner died. And once he was dead, the summon vanished. Defense came first. No matter the cost. After paying, Hempri added mockingly that even an idiot could tell the armor was made from top-grade steel. It did feel solid, until Kim tried walking. 2 steps in, he couldn't move a muscle. The weight was crushing. Hempri smirked, saying not being able to move was actually helpful for someone like Kim. The armor required 24 strength to wear. Kim had 4. It might as well have been a mountain strapped to his chest. He tried selling it back, but Hempri's attitude flipped instantly. He scoffed and said he'd only offer 30 gold. Kim nearly exploded. He just paid 350. He groaned. Now he was getting scammed by an NPC. Then he noticed something odd. A floating exclamation mark hovered above the blacksmith's head. Curious, Kim asked about it. Hempri went berserk, flipping boxes and shelves. He shouted that his hammer was missing. He couldn't forge a single thing without it. Kim glanced around, pointing out that there were hammers everywhere. But Hempri barked that he meant that hammer. The legendary one. It must have fallen into a waterlogged dungeon near the village entrance. He demanded that Kim retrieve it. System alert. Quest unlocked. Hempri's headache. Objective. Retrieve Hempri's forging hammer reward. Unlock the ability to craft armor using raw materials. Kim's eyes lit up. A hidden quest. So that's why high-purity steel is so valuable. It wasn't just for show. It was core to crafting. The true backbone of boss-tier equipment. Without hesitation, he accepted the quest. No more guilds, no more betrayal, no more backstabbing loot splits. Soloing was the way. A small dungeon like this, he could clear it in 30 minutes, tops. Then Hempri spoke again, casually suggesting they head out together. Kim blinked. System notification. If Poison Tongue Hempri dies, the quest will fail. Kim's jaw clenched. Seriously? Now he had to babysit this level 13 deadweight? And the guy looked completely oblivious to the danger ahead. Great. Just great. Now it wasn't just a fetch quest. It was an escort mission from hell. Kim Chulsoo figured he could breeze through the dungeon and ignore the mobs. Escort missions weren't new to him. He knew the trick. Just move far enough ahead and the NPC would freeze in place, waiting. Perfect. He ditched the blacksmith at the entrance without a second thought. But his plan fell apart in seconds. A system alert flashed. Poison Tongue Hempri is under attack. Kim gritted his teeth, cursed, and immediately ordered the goblin to double back and handle it. The goblin obeyed without hesitation, tearing through the monsters in a flurry of wild, efficient strikes. In moments, the corridor was quiet again. As the dust settled, Scattered loot glittered on the floor, standard monster drops. But in the center of the mess lay the missing hammer, its polished metal gleaming like a spotlight. Hempri picked it up and proudly declared that the monsters were no match for Hempri the Great. Kim rolled his eyes. He told the old man to cut the bragging and stick to staying alive. Before they could regroup, a strange rumble echoed deeper in the dungeon. Then, with zero warning, Hempri sprinted toward it like he just smelled treasure, straight into danger. Kim clenched his fists. Part of him wanted to let the idiot die and be done with it, but that would mean failing the quest, and throwing away the hidden crafting reward. So he sent the goblin forward once again, this time with orders to protect the maniac. He calculated quickly. If he tried to rush ahead and summon the goblin later, the old man would die for sure. That left only one choice: clear every monster room together. To his surprise, Hempri didn't just hide behind the goblin. The blacksmith charged in, hammer swinging, like he had something to prove. He moved like a man possessed, striking down mobs while yelling about his glory days. The goblin stuck close, slicing down enemies with ruthless accuracy. Honestly, it was doing all the real work, but the old man sure played the part of a hero. The pace was slow, frustrating, but it was safer than leaving him behind. Mid-fight, Hempri suddenly turned to Kim and barked that he wasn't just some overweight baggage. He declared that he used to be a warrior back in the day, and no belly was going to change that. Before Kim could reply, the old man let out a roar, activating a taunt skill that echoed through the tunnels. Kim cursed under his breath. This guy just aggroed every monster in earshot. As if on cue, a massive skeletal boss emerged from the shadows, hollow eyes glowing with malice. Even worse, it summoned a swarm of mini-skeletons that poured in like floodwater. Hempri cheered, fists pumping. He said it was finally time for a real fight. Kim wanted to scream. The blacksmith had intentionally woken up the boss. This wasn't a quest, it was a curse. Amid the chaos, the goblin picked up a small rock, as if bored. It activated its throw skill and hurled the stone with surgical precision. Crack. 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 Every mini-skeleton collapsed in a neat row of one-hit kills. 3 exhausting hours later, the so-called escort was still sprinting headfirst into danger. Hempri didn't walk. He dragged Kim through the dungeon like it was a death trap designed. Kim Chulsoo had barely caught his breath after dragging that mad blacksmith through the dungeon. His level had finally ticked up from 34 to 37, something, at least. But before the relief could settle in, a strange metallic clink echoed through the tunnel. "It's a trap!" The blacksmith suddenly shouted. Too late. 3 poison-tipped arrows flew from the shadows. Acting on instinct, Kim yanked his goblin in front of him. The little gremlin took the hit like a champ. Kim glanced back, confused. Wasn't this area already cleared? Then he spotted the pressure plate. The blacksmith had stepped on it, again. The old fool, struck in the side, had the audacity to yell at Kim, calling him a coward for dodging. A system message cut through the argument. Venomous Hempili is poisoned. Venomous Hempili has died. Quest failed. Kim Chulsoo nearly screamed. All this grinding, and now the quest failed because some deranged blacksmith couldn't keep his boots off trap plates. Furious, he stormed off, ready to wring the old man's neck. But as he searched, he caught sight of a few shady players watching him from the shadows. Eyes narrowed, he ignored them and pressed on until he found the blacksmith calmly tinkering with some scrap metal. Fuming, Kim shouted at him, demanding some last words before he turned him into an anvil. The blacksmith simply smiled and thanked him for helping find the hammer. Kim blinked, stunned. A new system message appeared. Quest complete. Retrieve Hempili's forging hammer. New feature unlocked. Equipment crafting. The blacksmith explained that the hammer had dropped from the first monster they killed. Kim nearly fainted. All that chaos, and he had the damn thing the entire time? The blacksmith sneered and said it was because Kim was trash. That's why he didn't notice. Then, unfazed, he went to work, hammering away with surprising precision. As he worked, he muttered that true armor quality comes from the sweat of the blacksmith. A few minutes later, with a final clang, the armor was done. He presented the gleaming piece with a smug smirk. It was made from high-purity steel, blue steel light armor, a rare grade piece. It had a 1% chance to trigger heaven-crushing strike when hit. The blacksmith warned him not to thank him, said it would make him nauseous. Kim scoffed. No worries, gratitude was never in his plans anyway. Then a system alert hit. PK mode activated. A blade flashed toward his chest. He twisted, dodging just in time. His attacker sneered, demanding to know if he was the one responsible for injuring his lady. He accused Kim of betraying her, of leaving her to die. Kim blinked, confused. Who? Then the name hit him. Catherine. The beauty from that mining dungeon. He quickly insisted she betrayed him first, that he was the one left behind. But the man snarled that Kim stood here alive while Catherine hadn't woken up since the encounter. She was in a coma. The revelation hit hard. Kim defended himself, saying it was the hidden boss that did it, not him. The man didn't care. He said Catherine's coma had thrown the Dayshining Group's succession plans into chaos. She was the heir, and her condition now threatened everything. He lunged again. Kim barely summoned his goblin in time. The goblin blocked the blade with ease, taking no damage. Kim quickly pivoted. He asked if the girl was really the daughter of that Dayshining Group, the global megacorp that ruled everything from phones to semiconductors. The man confirmed it. She was still unconscious in the hospital, stuck between worlds. Hit by an 80-level boss in a hidden dungeon, her mind had simply shut down. Kim admitted quietly that she was meant to unlock the hidden class, not him. But somehow, he survived. Somehow, he became the summoner. The man demanded answers. How did someone barely level 30 survive something that broke a level 40 elite? Kim could only say it was luck. The mood shifted. The bodyguard warned Kim to watch his words. Catherine was alive, just not waking up. Doctors had tried everything. No one knew what was keeping her trapped. Kim clenched his fists. He declared they couldn't just wait, maybe the answer was inside the game itself. He remembered a story from the West, where a player woke from a coma inside a dungeon called Gate of Heaven. It was probably just myth. 1 in 10 million. But desperate people cling to anything. Yes, he was lying. Giving false hope. But hadn't Catherine deceived him first? Then, shockingly, the plan was approved. The chairman gave the green light. They were going to forcibly log her comatose body into the game. Kim couldn't believe it. They were that desperate. If they ever found out he'd lied, they could erase him from the planet. But if he succeeded, it'd be the deal of a lifetime. He'd just have to pretend. Pretend to be the hero trying to save her. Pretend he cared. And if he failed, he could always bow his head and say, "Sorry for your loss." Genius. But then came the real problem. How do you run quests with a comatose teammate? Dragging her around wasn't an option, until it hit him. He could have the goblin pull her. System-wise, as long as a character moved, it counted as progress. It worked. Sort of. Nearby players were horrified. Someone shouted, asking if he was seriously letting a goblin drag an unconscious woman. Kim panicked and said they were really close. Another player shot back that if closeness made something okay, then punching him in the face was fair game too. It was just like that public humiliation in the beginner village, again. Then a voice interrupted, gruff and familiar. It was the bald monk from before. He waved Kim over, said there was no time to explain. The monk spotted the goblin and nodded, impressed. Said it probably saved them during the last raid. Kim cut him off. He didn't want praise, he wanted answers. What was the Abaddon Guild up to? The monk shrugged and said the last gathering was just for a raid. The guild didn't move as a whole very often. Kim knew this guy was some kind of intel source. He pressed again, asking about Phoenix City. The monk hesitated, then admitted he didn't know much. The dungeons there didn't follow normal schedules. They only appeared if you fulfilled hidden conditions. He eyed Kim curiously, then asked why he was so obsessed with dungeons. Why he freaked out if a run was delayed even by a second. Kim blinked in confusion. The voice chuckled, warning not to get caught abusing glitches or someone might report him. Then it shifted tone, advising that climbing the in-game ladder took patience. Phoenix City, it added, was a good next stop. Apparently, that city housed the next storyline trigger, and players were all over the place chasing it. Kim processed the tip slowly. Completing the main questline could unlock access to higher-level zones. He cursed himself. How had he not realized that earlier? He was ready to move on, with his goblin at his side and his next goal set, but then, he noticed something was off. The beautiful woman who had been tailing him a moment ago, gone. Alarm surged through him. He scanned the area and spotted her, now slumped unconscious in the hands of two sleazy-looking players. One of them sneered, wondering aloud what a woman like her was doing hanging around a loser. He laughed that she'd have more fun with them. They commented on her top-tier gear, speculating that she must have gone AFK. Maybe stepped away to use the bathroom. Either way, she wasn't fighting back. One of them grinned and suggested they protect her, adding that it would make things way more fun for them. Kim's pulse spiked. She wasn't just unconscious, she was helpless. And if anything happened to her, if she took even one hit, the blame would land squarely on him. Just then, a system ping hit his interface. The bodyguard had sent him a message. "How's the young lady doing?" asked the voice on the other end of the call. Kim Chulsoo replied without hesitation, his tone upbeat. He said she was doing great. If the man wanted to check in on her, sure. Just send over some cash first. Oh, and as a heads up, he added, she was kind of preoccupied with him at the moment. Maybe later. The call ended abruptly. The bodyguard, watching the whole exchange, muttered an apology. He admitted he might have overreacted. But the man next to him simply waved it off, calm and unconcerned. He told the guard not to worry. What was the worst that could happen? That man was Han Jun, chairman of the Shimmy Group, level 76. He knew exactly who Catherine was. Heiress to the vast shimming empire. And as for the guy she was with, just some nobody. A glitch in the system. What kind of chaos could someone like that even cause? Still, the bodyguard wasn't convinced. He asked why they would entrust someone like Kim Chulsoo with her care. If in-game treatment was really viable, shouldn't they be the ones supervising it? Han Jun scoffed and said there was no point pretending otherwise. Even if Catherine didn't make it, what would really change? He explained that as the daughter of Shimming, her entire life had been dictated for her. Obedience was all she'd ever known. The only decision she'd ever made for herself was joining Heaven's Gate. In here, she could finally breathe. Better that than wasting away in a sterile hospital room, he added. Meanwhile, Kim Chulsoo was frantically searching the sprawling village for Catherine. The place was massive, dozens of streets, hundreds of buildings. He had no idea where to even begin. Then he remembered. During that earlier argument with Ji Yun, something strange had happened. He'd somehow earned a point of goblin affinity, and with it, a new skill had unlocked. He opened the goblin skill shop and scanned the list. One caught his eye, Goblin Lifelink. It allowed him to sacrifice his own HP to heal his goblin, scaling with the amount given. He immediately dismissed it. His goblin never lost HP. What was the point? But the second unlocked skill made him pause. Goblin Toss. He could now throw his goblin in any direction. It was meant as a basic positioning tool, but to Kim Chulsoo, it sparked a ridiculous and brilliant idea. Why not use the goblin as an aerial scout? He tested it instantly. With a precise spin, he hurled the goblin high into the sky. It soared over rooftops, scanning the area. Sure enough, it spotted her. Catherine. He broke into a run, shouting internally that Big Bro was here now. From this moment on, they'd never be apart. But as he got closer, two players were already standing next to her, level 44 and level 46. Both were grinning, eyes locked on Kim as he approached. One of them sneered and asked if that ugly creep from earlier was still following her around. He called Kim a freak. Kim's blood boiled. Did they think this was a joke? Did they really believe he'd gone through all this for fun? The two clowns puffed out their chests, announcing themselves as the handsome duo, self-proclaimed rescuers of helpless damsels. Without waiting for a response, they charged at Kim like they were noble knights riding into battle. He didn't even flinch. Seconds later, his goblin made short work of them. No effort. No sweat. Just two beatdowns delivered with surgical efficiency. Kim mocked them as they crumpled to the ground. He said that's what wannabe heroes get for jumping into a story they didn't belong in. The same ugly freak they'd mocked had just stomped them flat. That satisfaction, that moment of turning ridicule into dominance, it made Kim burst out laughing. The sound echoed through the city streets. And that wild laughter caught the attention of a nearby city guard. He wondered aloud what kind of lunatic could be making that racket. The answer came fast. There stood Kim Chulsoo, wild-eyed, grinning, clutching a woman under one arm like a trophy. And a goblin stood behind him. Kim exhaled through a cracked chuckle and gleefully declared that he was screwed. The knight stormed forward, sword drawn, accusing Kim of mass murder and kidnapping. He shouted furiously, demanding to know if Kim thought he could get away with it. Kim waved a hand and calmly insisted it was all a misunderstanding. He said it was just a twisted story. But inside, panic churned. He thought if people were going to spread rumors, couldn't they at least make him sound cool? He admitted silently this was his first real game and cursed the waste of time. Still, he hoped he could salvage the situation. That hope vanished instantly when his goblin shrieked, "Kiek!" Suddenly, a bald man confronted him. He pretended to know Kim and said aloud that he's been looking for him everywhere. Kim remembered him as the liar from before and asked what he's doing here. The man asked why Kim had killed a guard and sneaked into the dungeon. He warned that impersonating a prisoner and committing murder will escalate matters. If Kim didn't want to die, he'd better play along. The man said he'd handle the rest. Caught off guard, Kim offered a hesitant thanks, unsure if this guy was helping. Then, the man approached the guard and casually says that he appreciates his work. The guard asked what he's plotting and what's behind his back. At that moment, a blue system message popped up. NPC gifting. Give an NPC a gift to raise your relationship with them. The bald man smiled and asked while passing a pouch of gold why don't he pretend that he never saw anyone in return for this. The guard asked why was he suddenly handing him so much gold. Before they could celebrate, the guard started dragged the baldy with him for the crime of giving a bribe to an honest man like him. Then came another system ping. Relationship level decreased. And you have committed a crime. Kim blinked and muttered aloud, wondering if this guy was secretly a nice person. The scene shifted to the gates of a temple. Kim shouted in frustration, demanding to know why he couldn't pass. Above him stood a guard who flatly said, "No means no." Kim protested, saying he was here for a main quest. A yellow-robed man suddenly interjected, telling Kim to stop wasting his efforts. Kim narrowed his eyes and asked who he was. The man smiled confidently and exclaimed that he is Shin. Seeing the exclamation point above his head, Kim realized that he's giving him a quest. The man said he liked Kim's eyes. They looked like those of a real adventurer. He added that Kim could help him with some lost ruin, and asked him to prove his worth. The man told him if he did well, he'd be granted entry to the castle. But Kim kept pressing the skip dialogue button, causing the NPC to curse at him. A system alert followed. Main quest. Show your skills. Bring the core of a golem. Reward. 25,000 express. Kim groaned internally and muttered that he should have let the man explain things earlier. He repeated the phrase, "lost ruin," to himself, then focused on the path forward. He looked over the edge of a platform into a lava-filled dungeon and thought that with his agility maxed speed, he should be able to get through easily, but the problem is that he needs to make sure she doesn't take damage. He says aloud that he doesn't like her, but he doesn't want to deal with her getting hurt either. He ordered his goblin, telling him to wait for the signal before advancing. Kim took a breath, nodded. Then came a scream. Without hesitation, Kim dove into action. As soon as he passed the trial, he shouted for the goblin to move. Summoner skill. Rally. Kiek. The goblin howled and launched itself into Kim. Kim watched, impressed. The skill really was powerful, but only on basic enemies. Suddenly, seeing the leash in the goblin's hand, he realized the skill didn't include her. Seeing the woman falling, he shouted in panic. Kim panicked, screamed at the goblin to save her. The goblin hurled its ripe, launching her midair, but with poor aim. She flew towards the saws. Kim screamed in rage, demanding to know what the goblin was doing. Then he could only cover his eyes as he heard the disgusting tearing sounds. When she got down, he called out to her, saying that she couldn't die in a place like this, of course for his own sake rather than her own. Unconscious, Catherine recalls a distant memory. A man calls out to her. The man, a tall and intimidating figure with sharp features and white hair, stands in the middle of a dimly lit room. His white shirt is untucked and slightly disheveled, and he grips a golf club in his right hand. His tone is cold and accusatory as he stares down at the young girl before him. He asks her if she came home late because she was out with her friends. He states that he has told her many times that friends at her age are nothing but fleeting, worthless nobodies who are bound to be forgotten. Raising the cane with a threatening motion, he says that with her makeup and shortened skirt that makes her look like a whore, has she decided to live like a subhuman. The girl, with wide, fearful eyes, bows her head and clasps her hands together. She says she's sorry and vows to never do it again. He responds that perhaps she might remember if they made the punishment a bit more intense this time. He then declares that he'll teach her a lesson today. Tears streaming down her face, the girl screams that she's sorry. She yells that she's really sorry and begins to cry out for her mother. She screams for her mother to help, calling out, "Mom," in desperation. Her voice echoes, pleading for someone to stop him. She begs her mother to do something, repeatedly crying out, "Moom," as she glances over her shoulder in terror. Behind a crack in a door, a woman's eye peers out silently. The girl, sobbing, calls out to her again, "Mom." Her mom stares at the girl with a chilling expression, her eyes cold and devoid of empathy. She declares that she is her only flaw. She then opens her eyes and sees Kim calling out to her. He asked the goblin desperately what they should do. The goblin just screeched. Kim's face went pale. He demanded to know what that meant. His mind spun. Was it saying mouth to mouth? Seriously? Kim muttered to himself, horrified. He'd never even held a girl's hand. Now he was expected to do that. Sure, it was just a game, he thought, but it felt real. The sensation engine made everything feel too real. He looked down at her peaceful face and tried to convince himself it was fine. Maybe she just fainted. He remembered drama cliches. Maybe this was the moment. With fake confidence, he declared he was doing CPR. As his face got closer, the system interface appeared. Then, a call came through, asking how's the young lady. Kim shouted in shock. The butler. Kim frantically said she wasn't dead, that he hadn't done anything. Please, just trust him. The voice replied that he was aware. He confirmed he was observing the situation through in-game monitoring and explained that while she was unconscious, her gear protects her vitals. A system message appeared. Rare item, magical dress of the phoenix. Def plus 85, res plus 110, HP regeneration when unconscious. The butler explained she wouldn't die unless dragged into a hidden dungeon. Kim repeated the relief aloud. She wasn't dead. Then the voice clarified his reason for calling. He wanted to make sure Kim didn't do anything unnecessary while she was out cold. Before he could finish, Kim hung up on him. Kim's expression lit up. He grinned wildly, clutched his goblin, and declared they were heading to the boss room at full speed. Kiek. The goblin agreed. A massive stone ball roared toward them. Kim grabbed the woman and used her as a surfboard as they skidded down the path. Next objective. Cross the broken bridge. They threw her to the other side, then used her as a hook to the other side while passing through the rope. She still wasn't moving. New objective. Kill the golem. A giant stone golem loomed ahead. Kim used her as a morning star to smash the golem. But before she could reacg it, the golem swatted her down. Kim gasped, realizing he'd charged in too fast, too cocky, and used her as a projectile. He gets a system message. You have gained a goblin point. Kim shouted at the golem for daring to attack his multi-purpose anti-trap diffuser. He ordered his goblin to finish it in one blow. The golem advanced. The goblin screeched and attacked. The red-clad woman stirred slightly. The golem swung. The goblin countered, landing a critical hit that sent the golem flying. Kim watched calmly, remarking that the goblin wasn't even winded. He said he'd just need to take the golem's core now. But suddenly, the golem's body pulsed with energy, purple lightning. It regenerated, grew larger. Kim shouted in disbelief. Why is it getting bigger? And worse, it leveled up. He ordered the goblin to destroy it. The goblin charged again. As it smashed its hand, the golem regenerated again and grew stronger. Kim told the goblin to block the hit, not attack it. But the golem struck, hurling the goblin into a wall of fire. Explosions ripped through the room. Kim cursed. He realized the golem wouldn't stay dead unless the core was destroyed. It had a phylactery, an anchor of resurrection. He recalled the old man's warning that without a direct hit to the core, They'd be stuck in an endless loop. Kim debated. Should he hunt for the core or keep fighting? But what if it grew even stronger? What if it became stronger than the goblin? Catherine strode ahead as the golem threw a fist in her direction. This punch triggered her PTSD of TTHE Goblin King. She could only whisper, "EH." Then she screamed. A bone-chilling wail of fear that echoed across the battlefield.